And that was the first thing I was going to ask. I think it would behoove us all, especially when Kim starts, that we mute. And then if we have a question or something, that we can unmute for that. And that way there won't be phones ringing and conversations going on that will interrupt. So I want to especially thank Kim for taking this morning to be with us. We really appreciate it. Kim is the chair of CORD, which is the Committee on Racial Diversity in our diocese, and we we thank you for coming and being with us and leading us this morning. What I would like to do before we begin is say I don't know what kind of time frame we'll have after we're finished, but historically, at our retreats that we do in person, we allow a few minutes or some time for people to voice their concerns or bitch or moan or groan or whatever they want to do about the New River Episcopal Ministries. And I thought it would be good that we might have that time if time allows. Um, so we'll think about if you have any questions or concerns. After Kim finishes, we'll open the floor up for that. But I would like to open up with a prayer. And prayer is a very powerful thing. And sometimes, especially we Episcopalians, when we just read prayers out of the prayer book and collects and stuff, it tends to be more of us just reading a prayer. And as the Celtics say, um, prayer is one of those thin places that we enter into, that we are connected with God. And I think we should really and earnestly take prayer that serious when we pray, that we are cognizant and aware of we are in one of those thin places in the presence of God. So let's just take a short time and to center ourselves and allow ourselves to go into that thin place. And I'm going to pray one of the prayers that CORD has on our diocesan website. There are collect prayers for each month of the year, and they're wonderful, wonderful prayers. But this one is my favorite, and we're going to pray that. I'm going to pray that for all of us after we take a moment of silence. Let us pray. One God in three persons, creator of one human species in many hues, all who pray to you are descendants of Adam and Eve, all members of one race called human. Forgive the blindness that causes our eyes to notice and magnify those things we regard as different from ourselves and others. Teach us to see clearly that we, your children, are far more alike than we are different. Help us to put aside the racial prejudices embedded within us and to see within every person the child of God you created, our sister or brother, destined for glory. In the name of one who died for all persons of all colors, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
That's my favorite of those 12 collect prayers. And I think that's kind of going to be the theme that we're going to be talking about today. And as I said, Father Kim Webster from St. Matthew's Church in Charleston, and he is the chair of CORD that Maggie sits on as well. And we hand it over, and thank you again for coming. And I give you the floor, Father Webster.
Thank you, Father Stan. I appreciate it. That's a beautiful prayer. That I would remind you that the website, on the diocesan website, if you go under ministries, you can find CORD, Committee on Racism and Diversity, and there's always new content every month. We've been updating it every month because Kathy Ruley does a great job for us with that. We're also a diverse committee with different voices, and some really want us to go out there and start being activists, and others kind of want us to kind of just go slow. So we're trying to hit a pace in the middle. So I'll start. This is not, take your pencils, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me just start with the CORD mission statement, which is very helpful to understand what we're trying to do. The mission statement is to work for the inclusion of all people in the life and work of the church and community, with the utilization of education, group interaction, anti-discrimination dialogues, and prayer. The goal of CORD is to bring about mutual understanding, respect, true appreciation, and fair treatment of all people. We work for the eradication of discrimination because of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, national origin, religion, or other differences. The motto for CORD, which we inherited from years ago and we still adhere to, is many faces, one spirit, which is kind of part of the core principles of the Christian faith. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So that's what CORD's mission statement is. But let me tell you what it was. Years and years ago in the Episcopal Church, there was a 3-day, 24-hour training cycle for anti-racism and diversity training. It was a 3-day weekend. And that seemed to be a bit much, because I don't know about you, but I was a theater major, and we all understand that if you hear the audience moving in their seats, they're bored and they stop listening. So the motto was, the mind can only contain as much as the rear end can endure. If you start thinking about your comfort, then you're not listening. What we did in this diocese when I first got here, and it was ably led, it was about a 6 or 7 hour day, but basically, and this is going to sound pejorative, and it's not meant to be, but it sounds that way. You would come in and sit down for your 6 to 8 hour training session, and at the end of it, you were like stamped as anti-racist and you were good. The truth is that didn't do anything. You got bored quickly, you weren't paying attention, and then you started going, yeah, I heard that, yeah, I heard that, yeah, I heard that. But now in the present culture we find ourselves in, the new shape for this training is it's a starting of and a continuation of dialogue, talking to each other. You can only do that if you take time with it. And as I said earlier, some members of the CORD committee would like us to go ahead and commit to social action and get off our duffs and start doing something. And Bishop Klussmeyer would say to you, yeah, we've been talking about race in the church for 40 years and we've done nothing, actually. We've done nothing. We've talked about it. And I don't know about you, but in my experience of 23, 24 years as a priest, and before that as a person in the pews, a layperson, the Episcopal Church has a history. When it jumps out on social issues, we get smacked and we get people upset with us. And when we step back and sit on our hands, we get smacked and people get mad at us. So you can't win for losing. So what you might as well do is what you feel like in your heart is what you're called to do. So if that's the case, what we're trying to do is say, from here on, we'll try to help you talk about these issues. And there's going to be some mighty hurdles along the way. because some people, the terminology, you have to throw some words at you, and I will with their definitions a little bit, but this is not a I talk, you take notes. This is, we need to talk together and know that this is an open, safe place to talk. I had one experience in my vestry where somebody announced to the room, because we were talking about cord, I'm sick and tired of Bishop Mike calling me a racist. I am not. And that person went on to tell why they thought that was the way the world really was. And I said, well, first of all, thank you for your willingness to open up and say that. I'm not going to counter what you're saying, because how you feel about it is what you feel. And there's no debate about your feelings. They're valid and they are what they are. But the truth is, there are certain things we need to understand in a white dominated culture that are now coming to the fore. And you can get, the catchphrase is woke. You can get woke about these things and suddenly start to see them unfolding in culture. Or you can do what most of us like to do, is to back up. And I had another parishioner tell me at the back door one Sunday, I don't know why we're talking about race. It's not a problem if we don't talk about it. Well, that's part of the problem. And that's a defense mechanism, because it's uncomfortable. Even within the core committee, Maggie can tell you, we had one member of the committee going, well, when you say white, I was never privileged. I was poor. I don't gain from white privilege. I was poor. And he's like, that's not what it's talking about. Mm-hmm. White privilege is the things we never think about, and this is just by way of introduction. I don't know about you, but I've never worried about I'm embarrassed when I'm pulled over by a police officer because I'm speeding, but I'm not fearful for my safety. When I walk into a store, I was followed around, a Louis Vuitton place, because I clearly looked out of place in New York. I didn't even know what Louis Vuitton luggage was. But so they looked at me like, he don't belong here because he don't know what he's doing. But I've never been followed around a clothing store. No one's ever assumed I was up to no good. That's part of white privilege. So the first thing I'd like to do for us in that vein is start with an introduction from each of you to know who you are, where you're from, and kind of what you're all about. So I'll start. You don't have to follow my pattern. It's up to you. But I was born in rural North Carolina. I moved to rural Pittsylvania County, which is the largest county in Virginia, but it is also the tobacco county of the state. Almost everybody was growing tobacco to be sold for cigarettes. We had black and whites everywhere, but we were separated and we didn't get together very often. I remember growing up and watching the blacks only, white only bathrooms at the ballparks. They weren't they weren't enforced anymore, but they were still there and you could still see them. Now, of course, some of that's been taken away, but I remember growing up with that. Then I moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, and then went to drama major in undergraduate school. And then I went to nursing school. Then I had children and didn't think much about race because Lynchburg was the same way. It was the same pattern I knew growing up. It was black and white neighborhoods, kind of like a checkerboard, only interacted when they absolutely had to, but pretty much black and white. Lynchburg's pretty much black and white town. That's how it worked. Well, then I moved to seminary in Alexandria. Alexandria is a melting pot of people from everywhere. You wouldn't believe the different accents and languages you would hear just walking down the streets of downtown Alexandria. Plus, most of the people that worked for the federal government lived in Alexandria. So those black SUVs with the support cars would show up Monday through Friday picking people up. Cisneros, the transportation guy or HUD guy, lived around the block, around the corner from us. So we saw those people all the time. Then we moved back to Lynchburg, came back then we moved to Waynesboro. And when I moved into Waynesboro, I had started to pay attention to because of Alexandria, I started to pay attention to what multicultural stuff looked like. and where you could see it the most. When I walked into the high school to set my son up to go to high school at Waynesboro High School, I looked at all the pictures on the walls, and everybody everywhere was white. There was like one black guy on the football team, one black coach, which meant one black teacher. But everybody else was white. Everybody in all those pictures were white. Then we moved into our home, and I heard Polish, Swahili, Spanish, and Russian in my neighborhood. Parents talking to their children. So my neighbor across the street was from Poland. He had only been in the United States for about 3 years. And he said, his son came over and I said, how long have you guys been here? And Daniel, with a heavy Polish accent in English, said, 4 years. And I went, how did you get here? He said, oh, no, we moved here. Oh, what do you want to know? I moved here. Well, then we talked to his parents. Waynesboro is about 30 minutes south of Harrisonburg, Virginia. Harrisonburg has James Madison University and Eastern Mennonite University. EMU has had a refugee resettlement program for almost 75 years. And those people come from all over the world. And many of them came to live in Waynesboro because housing was cheap. So we learned that the neighborhood is not necessarily as monochromed as you might think. The first time I heard Chris and his wife Pat arguing in Polish, there's some mean language, there's some mean words come out in Polish that you don't want to hear if they're spoken in anger, because it just sounds angrier than it did in English. But that didn't happen very often. So that's my story. So what is yours? Who are you and where are you from? Who wants to start? Nobody. You're not going to get out. I'm going to start calling names.
Okay. I was bred, born, and reared right here in Fayetteville. And Kent Higgins is also on court. And as he said many times, we are a segregated town, and we still are a segregated town. I moved away to Michigan to go to law school. And after I graduated from law school, went to suburban Detroit. Now, Detroit is largely Black. And at that time, mid-70s, Detroit was just, every building was run down. Most of them were vacant. And it did have a renaissance of sorts. I began attending a large Episcopal church in the suburbs, which was a warm and welcoming community. We had a gay priest. We had people of every race, and it was wonderful. It was a very rich experience. When the bishop said I could be on cord, immediately all the members were kind of deluged, I thought, with read this book, read that book. And one of the first books I read, and I can't think of the name of it right now, it's a senior moment, it was about how to talk to white people about racism. And so I was reading that book, and it's a very short little book, and I thought it was very good. And I got to one of the chapters, and it started off with a list of reasons that people will tell you why they aren't racist. One of these things on the list, I never thought of myself as racist until I looked at that list. And one of the first things on there was, I have adopted children of another race. Well, I have adopted children of another race. And I thought, that does not mean I'm not racist. And I had said to the members of CORD one night that what CORD has done for me is to make me look at myself and my actions in a different way, in a deeper way. And I hope that by the time I either resign from CORD or get kicked off, I will be able to say and have it actually be true that I am not racist. Racism for a white person is a tricky, nuanced thing, and we can all think that we are removed from it, that we aren't overtly nasty or prejudiced, or pick your description. But it is the they call them microaggressions. It is the microaggressions, our reactions that are sort of below the surface that need to be worked on. So, but anyhow, so that's my background. I thought I wasn't racist, but I think I am. And I hope to rid myself, at least mostly, of that.
Hey, thank you, Meg. Thank you very much. Dr. Kendi at Boston, not Boston College, Boston University. He's a Black sociology guy. And he says there are no racists. And he's Black. He says there are no racists. They're just people who support and maintain racist ideas. That's what he says. Next.
Well, we'll get the clergy out of the way.
That's right. Go ahead, Sam.
And I don't know how everyone is lined up on your screen, but go, Kim, start from the top left, go right from here on out.
We'll do it.
I like Maggie, grew up right where I am. A matter of fact, the first house my parents rented at that time is literally directly straight across the street from where my home is right now. I mean, 50 feet. We're 50 feet from my beginnings. Wow. Yeah, that's true. We later moved up into Pratt. But one of my earliest stories about, and a little snot-nosed kid didn't process all this. But when I grew up, right behind our backyard was the railroad tracks. And right across the railroad tracks was two Black families. And one of the Black families' last name was Holmes. And my twin brother and I would be walking down the street, and there was this old retired fella that lived right below us. And we'd walk down the street, and he would say, "Oh, there's those Holmes boys from across the tracks." And my brother and I would get fuming mad about that for some reason. That he would do that. And well, we're not from across the tracks. You know how kids are. And I went home one day, just fuming about that. And my mother, God bless my mother, she was eons ahead of her time, set us down and gave us our first lesson on prejudice and racism. And from that point on, it didn't seem to bother me as well. And then I started school, and it was right at the very time that schools were integrated, first year. That's when I started first grade, first year that they started integration. And there were kids from here in Hansford, and the kids across, the Holmeses across the railroad. And we all started school together, and we went all the way through school, up to high, K through 12 together. And then when we went to junior high, then they came from other places. I don't know if Eddie's still on here, but from Morris Drive, which was predominantly black section of Montgomery area, and didn't give it a thought. I had a dear friend, still a dear friend of mine, that would come and a black person that would come and spend the night with us. I mean, we were just good friends. And it wasn't until Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was in high school, and there was this huge division in our high school, and it was taking sides, whites over here, blacks over here, yelling obscenities and racial slurs, from the white people to the black people. And some of my white friends came up and said, "Buddy, you need to come over here and join us." I said, "I don't want any part of that. I don't understand. I don't know what's going on here." And that began me a journey of saying, wow, I thought all this stuff was over. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't. So then I went through, with my vocations up until I was a priest, and I had owned a business, a retail business, and I had one of my employees came in one day with a big T-shirt on of a rebel flag, and I said, "What do you have that on for?" And she said, "I hate the N-word." I said, "Do what?" I said, "Well, you can't wear that in here." She said, "You can't tell me." I said, "Oh, yes, I can." "You cannot wear that shirt." And she lived right next to the store. I said, "You cannot wear that shirt in my store. I have black people that come in here that I dearly love, and you either go home and change that shirt or go home and don't come back. That's your choice." But I want to share a transforming moment for me. It's kind of speaking the way Maggie spoke. And we talked about this last night at Compline with Harold Stewart, which used to be the chair of anti-racism committee, and the bishop. Back years ago, this was under Bishop Smith. That's how long ago it was. In diocesan convention, we made a resolution that we proclaimed that racism is a sin. That's a no-brainer. But the bishop had brought a priest in from the Diocese of Ohio, not Southern Ohio. I think it was the Diocese of Ohio. And he was a person of color. And he came in and led one of the forums that we always have on Saturday morning. And he asked, who in this room, and the room was full, even the bishop was there in the room. Bishop Smith was in that room. He said, "I want to see a show of hands of how many people in here feel as if they're not prejudiced." We all raised our hands, everyone in the room. And and that's what I was telling the bishop and Harold last night. I'd love to get my hands on that, what he led us through, that curriculum. But he led us through a curriculum, and it was on white privilege. That was what it was. Something I really hadn't ever
thought about,
heard that much. I don't know if I'd even ever heard that term or not. And he led us through probably an hour-long process. And at the end of that process, he said, "Now, I want to see a show of hands. How many people in this room feel as if they're not prejudiced?" There wasn't a hand went up. And that's saying what you were saying, Kim, that it's defining and coming to that place where we understand what it is rather than saying that we're not and leave it at that. So that was a transforming moment for me to see it in a whole different new light. It's like coming to know that Jesus is Lord and Savior of all. When you come to that converting, transforming moment, in your life that this is a social human issue that we need to get it out there and start conversation, dialogue about. So that's kind of been my process from
just talk about it. That's just
Exactly.
talk about it. And it's kind of like auricular confession. When you say it out loud to another human being, some of the sting comes out of it. It doesn't make it any better, but I've said it. I realize what that means and what I've been privileged to have, but doesn't mean I'm going to change everything overnight, because some of this stuff is deep seated. Well, the next person on my screen is Nancy. So we got one more ordained person and her husband. So you can do it together. You can do it separately. It's up to you. Or he was eating, so he could leave if he wants to.
Okay. Well, my story is pretty ordinary, I think. I grew up in Michigan. Like Maggie said, all the Black people lived in Detroit, and I didn't. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to different races in the little town we lived in. My dad expressed some prejudice in words, but in actions, he was actually very open. He was a doctor. He took care of all people. He didn't charge the $2 for the house call if the people couldn't afford it. And then I went to college. And in college, it was the time of the peace movement, and everything was accepted. We accepted gay people, we accepted Black people, and I just went along with that.
Where'd you go to school, Nancy?
MSU, Michigan State. And then later we came to West Virginia. And again, in West Virginia, I'm not blatantly exposed to a lot of different types of people, although I see them, and I find it difficult to engage with them, difficult to build relationships with them. Although in Hinton, there's not a lot of Black people, there's a lot of people in poverty, there's a gay community. There are a few Oriental people. So I just haven't really had that kind of personal exposure. Right now in the church, we are doing a book study on Dear Church. It's a letter from a Black gay Lutheran pastor about what's wrong with the church. And so that's interesting. And we have a couple of Black people participating in that. But that's my story.
Very good. To that, it's interesting. In the Clericus in Lynchburg, Virginia, there was 6 churches, basically, one of them outside of the city, but not very far. We started talking about, the Episcopal churches, for the most part, were white. That's just a fact. Look at the demographics, we're white. And so white that there is a Black ministerial association for Black clergy in our church, and there's whatever. But we started talking about, how do we be more open to the Black community? How do you do that? And what we came down to is, but you don't want to sheep steal, for God's sakes. You don't want to be jumping on other people's members and trying to get them to come to yours. That's just not how this works. Well, we didn't realize then that the answer was probably, you got to go to where the folks are. And you don't just hang out and ask them you just got to be there. One of the members of the core committee said she showed up at an NAACP meeting up in Maryland, and she sat on the back row and didn't say anything. And people kind of looked at her kind of funny. She's white, but they didn't draw attention to her, didn't say anything. She came back to the next meeting, sat in the back row. She came back to the next meeting, and somebody said, "You've been here 2 times in a row. Would you like to come down here and get involved in this?" And she said, "No, I just want to be here to show support." And the leader of that group said, "You're the first white person that's ever said that to us. Wow. Most people want to come up in here and tell us what to do, to fix things. She said, I'm just here to support any way I can. Tell me what you need me to do. And that was an open door experience for her. All right, Mike, you're up with the fireplace. That's beautiful home. And I'm glad you're feeling well.
Thank you. I'm Mike McNear. I live at Forest Hill, West Virginia in Summers County. I'm a Summers County native. I spent most of my life in West Virginia. I did live 10 years in Ohio, and most of my life in southern West Virginia in Summers County. I live in the house my father died in. My great-grandfather is buried about half a mile away, and my grandfather lived about a mile away. So we haven't gone very far. Didn't quite get off the farm, or at least we came back. I am a retired physician, a retired psychiatrist. I worked mostly in forensic psychiatry and chemical dependency. I am a recovering alcoholic with 37 years of sobriety. I just wanted to get that in there. I always considered myself not prejudiced. I grew up when theaters were segregated, the Black people sat in the balcony. I grew up when Black people were not served in restaurants. The schools were integrated when I was in the 7th grade. At the same time, my life is a little bit mixed. I consider myself not prejudiced for a long time, but all of us have some degree of racial prejudice. And the sooner we recognize that in our dealings with people, the better off both of us are. Some people think it's our reptilian brain that sees a person of a different race. They're not of my tribe. I need to be leery. But we need to train ourselves to overcome what we are seldom even conscious that we have. I grew up playing with Black children. My dad's office was very close to where there was segregation as to where Black people lived in Summers County. We only had a few Black people, but I grew up playing with Black children and knew most of the Black community very well. My father was on the Civil Rights Commission and made some issues about that. At the same time, we had a Black cook and maid and didn't see any incongruity about that at all. I didn't. I went to a Southern school, University of Virginia.
Oh, go Who's?
Yeah. And in 1960, the student radio station used to sign off the air with Dixie played very slowly as a hymn. And I was part of that culture, and still not racially prejudiced, by the way. I've seen a lot. I was fortunate to meet Martin Luther King when I was in college, met him very briefly, thought he was a great man. Almost went to Selma, but didn't.
Wow.
And one of my fraternity brothers did. And I was going to go, but at the last minute, I decided not to. And I guess that's the story of my life in a lot of areas where I wanted to become more active. I'm getting a little bit more active as I get older, because any consequences aren't going to last too long now. My grandmothers, by the way, were both full-fledged actual members of the UDC, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, who have created a lot of unfortunate mythology in our country. The nicest thing one of my grandmothers could say about the Black population, and she was very reserved with this compliment, was, he or she knows her place.
Ooh, yes.
And that was not good. So I think all of us, and I'm a little bit ashamed of the slowness that some of these things come to my own mind, and a little bit ashamed of the things I wish I had done and didn't do. but we all need to recognize that it is there. And one other thing, I'm very much interested in what one psychiatrist calls group evil. We would call it probably institutional evil or institutional racism. And that is so far below the level of some people's consciousness. It just goes on and on until we can see it. The first thing about solving a problem is admitting that there's a problem.
There's a problem.
Yeah, and this same psychiatrist calls, when people get together, they have a fragmentation of conscience. And groups, it's very hard for a group to develop a conscience, in my opinion. I've waxed enough philosophically. I'm retired, and I enjoy my church very much. I like what the church is doing about this. I want to become more involved of it. I've been sick recently, getting better. But you have to start out with where you are, and I accepted a lot of things that I saw growing up as comfortable and normal. Yet I had Black friends. Yet we had a Black cook and maid,
Nanny.
and that is a little bit contradictory. So that's in part who I am.
That's Mike. Thank you for that. My oldest son tells me your short exodus into Ohio. My oldest son is sarcasm is his middle name, and he said he lives in Charleston pretty much. He said, you know, Dad, most of our astronauts that left the planet are from Ohio. Those people will do anything to get out of Ohio. So, and then you think about when you said, it popped into my head in Waynesboro, there was all kinds of family, particularly people of means, judges and lawyers and doctors, and they would say, well, I'm not racist, I'm not prejudiced, but now that I think about it, we did have, and the phrase in Waynesboro was, we had help, which meant a Black nanny and a Black cook and a Black housekeeper that they gave stuff to, secondhand, did that kind of stuff. You get that? I get it. And institutional racism, you're right. If you think about it for a minute, things you never, I don't know about you, I was a history major and a drama major in undergraduate school. I had never heard of 1921 in Tulsa, when the white people just destroyed and murdered Black people for no apparent reason. I had never heard of that. I had no idea there was a Black Woodstock in Baltimore the same year as Woodstock. They had all Black entertainers and musicians, but we just now recovered some of those audios from those tapes, from those things that we just didn't hear about. And you'll hear people, I got some books, you're right, Maggie's right, we throw a lot of books at people. Some of them are easier to get your hand on and some of them are not. But part of that institutional racism, the redlining that banks did for Black neighborhoods, wouldn't give them a loan. In the city of Charleston, just found out from a Black minister, on one side of the city, there was a blooming Black community in the 50s and 60s with lawyers, doctors, businesses, and also drugs and prostitution, like any other big major city, right? So when they put 64 through, which makes more sense to put it on our side of the river, on the South Hills side, they took out that neighborhood to do it. Yeah. And they did it on purpose. And that's part of institutional racism. They couldn't allow that to continue to bloom because it was going to be bigger over time. Okay, Debbie.
Yeah, me?
Yeah, you.
Well, I'm married to Mike. We met when he was in Ohio. I'm also
you didn't want
recovering.
To go to space? You didn't want to go to space? You didn't want to go to space?
Actually, I met John Glenn several times and his wife, his lovely wife, because I'm a pilot and was active in a local flying club in Ohio when I lived there. My dad was a pilot and he wanted all of us kids to learn how to fly. And I was the only one who did. So, That was fun. I grew up in Wilmington, Ohio. I was born in Northern Ohio, born in Dayton, went to elementary school in North Canton, Ohio, and then moved to Wilmington. And that's where I graduated from high school. And I don't remember, I know that there was a Black community in Wilmington, but I don't remember the separation. Like our high school senior class president was Black. We didn't look at it like them and us at our age in high school. I'm sure that the adults did, but I know that I graduated from high school in '69, and that was when civil rights was a big issue in the country. And my dad worked for the Ohio Air National Guard, and we were prejudiced against. Wilmington didn't want the Guard at the Air Force Base. They didn't want us, and so he was not welcome in restaurants if he was wearing his uniform.
Wow.
Which, yeah, there was one pizza place that loved us. That's where we ate when we went out. So we experienced it to a certain degree. We'd heard that there was going to be a bunch of people from Xenia, Ohio, which was 18 miles away, coming to Wilmington to cause some trouble about civil rights. And my dad and a bunch of his friends from the Guard met them at the edge of town and sent them home back to Xenia. He didn't want trouble. The Guard didn't want trouble. It wasn't a National Guard thing. It was just, all the guys got together and did that. So I didn't feel like I had any kind of racism or bigotry or prejudice. I'm sure it's there. I mean, Mike has told me many, many times, we are all, we look at race, we look at gender. Those are the things that we notice first about people. You can't not notice it, okay? I don't know if that makes you racist. I just think it makes you aware. But white privilege, absolutely. You can't help it. And once you are, as you said, woke about it, then it's all over the place. And it's necessary to do something about it. It's absolutely necessary. When I moved here, I remember, I don't remember a lot about it in the first 10 years that I was here, because I didn't know anybody and I didn't make any effort to know anybody. When Obama started to run for president, that's when I made friends. That's when I got to know people. I was all in for Obama. And I met a lot of people who also were and went to a lot of meetings and campaign events. And then after he was elected, went to all those town halls for healthcare. And one of those town halls took us to Harrisburg, Virginia. And there was a storefront that had all Confederate stuff in it. And I was like, what the heck is that?
Yep.
A whole store where you could buy Confederate flags and shirts and license plates. And we just passed it on the road going to this meeting, but I'll never forget it. It's not there anymore, which I consider to be a good thing, but it was there. And of course, you can buy that stuff just about anywhere. It makes me sad that Hinton has a Confederate statue, and we want to try to remove it, relocate it. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. There's a lot of opposition, but my understanding of the history of West Virginia is that we seceded from Virginia and stayed with the North. So I don't understand it. And I'm not a whole lot willing to listen to the, heritage and history and all. I'm just not at the point where I can listen without getting emotional. So it's better for me not to even go there. But I certainly wanted want to be more aware and do what I can. I mean, we all should do that. We all should be there. Unfortunately, we all aren't.
Thank you. That's incredible. You talk about the people stopping the people, troublemakers from coming in years ago in Lynchburg, not that long ago, actually. The other thing I was going to tell Mike during Waynesboro, they were the local Rotary Club was doing blackface minstrel shows in through the 70s.
Wow.
And I was horrified, but what are you going to say? The other one, it was amazing. I guess it was probably, I got a seminar in 98. Oh, it's not that long ago. I mean, it's like 1992. The Klan, the KKK, decided it was going to do a rally in Lynchburg, Virginia. Okay, we got the big Confederate soldier at the top of Monument Terrace, and it's wars all the way down the terrace. It was going to be at the base where the Doughboy statue is. Well, there must have been about 900 protesters against them. And then I'm doing this pejoratively on purpose, the Grand Lizard guy couldn't show up, okay, the one they were expecting. So in Virginia, you can't cover your face, but you can wear your little costume if you want to. Only 3 KKK members showed up. All 3 of them from Roanoke, which is about an hour away from Lynchburg. The guy that had to stand up because the Grand Lizard couldn't be there is spewing hate against gays, blacks, Jews, whatever else, his whole party line. Camera crews in his face. Everybody's listening, people booing, chanting, screaming. Turns out on the news that night, when they run that segment, he lived in a predominantly black neighborhood in Roanoke and worked for a black-owned company.
Isn't that something?
So they said the next day, the news was, we reached out to his neighbors and we reached out to his employer. And the employer said, we had no idea Bob felt that way, but we're not going to do anything about that. We're just going to continue to employ him and treat him like a human being, which we hope he will have the common sense to treat us the same way. And his neighbors basically said the same thing. In my own neighborhood, we had a house across the street from us, been on the market for a while, finally got sold. Guy, apparently ex-military, whatever. Our neighborhood is very, nobody talks to anybody. It's very quiet because it's kind of isolated. On his porch, there is the flag of West Virginia, the American flag, and the red, blue stars and bars of the Army of Virginia. My wife saw that and immediately said, we need to talk to him. And I said, what are you going to say, darling? What are you going to say? He's going to tell you his house, his rules. She said, we have black neighbors up the street. And I said, I know. I've seen that young man walk past that house every day coming home from school. And she says, what does he do? And I went, he doesn't do anything. He didn't even look that way. But that's kind of what black folks have been having to do in this country for a long time, not look that way. Not look. And then another one, just a quick story on, I love this, a couple, you talk about what racism looks like. The black population in West Virginia is less than 6, it's like 4%. Yeah. So it's pretty much a white state. But at Westminster Canterbury, I did a marriage recommittal service for one of the employees and his wife, and it was in a Black Baptist church. It was absolutely a gorgeous place. And I was talking to him, I could talk to him, but we used to have coffee every day in the run up to that service. And I said, so you grew up in rural South Carolina in the 40s and 50s. That must have been horrible. And he went, no, it was a black dude. I said, no. He said, it wasn't. I said, man, racism is rare. I mean, it is overt prejudice and discrimination, people doing horrible things to people. He said, yeah, but when I was growing up, my mama said to me things like this: Bobby, don't go to Stan Holmes' store. He's in the Klan. He don't want you in there. And I said, that didn't bother you? He goes, no, because then she'd say, go to Mike McNair's store. He don't mind. He deals with everybody. And I went, well, that still sounds terrible, Bob. He said, no, Kim, it's worse now. Worse now? How in the world is it worse? And he said, because those Stan Holmeses are still out there, but we don't know who they are.
Right.
Which makes it institutional and deeper. All right, Donald, you're up.
Oh, okay. I grew up way before there was integration.
Okay.
And I grew up in a town like Stan Holmes at Hansford, and I live at Pratt now, big move. And Hansford was a fine place to grow up. There was blacks and whites. We all played ball together. There was no problem with the blacks and whites, except when you went to certain places to play another team. One place in particular said, if you got any blacks on your team, leave them home. Don't bring them with you. So we'd go without our black players if we went. Sometimes we didn't go. And then when I went to college, first time I went to school with a black was in college, and he was the only black person in our college, and he was a senior, as I was. And I graduated and became a teacher. I went to high school DuPont, and first time I'd had blacks in class, and I always treated my students, hopefully I did, same, no matter what color they were. And I guess I did because I volunteer at Montgomery General Hospital, and one of the ladies there is a black lady, and she's always giving me a hard time, just jokingly. And she told her daughter, and her daughter said, "Don't say a word about him because he treated us all the same." So I guess I did do all right. I had Stan in school. Feel sorry for me.
I'm sorry.
I had Stan and his twin both.
I was the one he mistreated.
But he had to. It was necessary.
That was an experience, I'll tell you. I don't know. I've never tried. I've always thought I was not, and I tried not to be prejudiced. And as I said, when I taught school, I was always tried to get them. But I remember going to Montgomery to the movies when I was growing up, and with there'd be several whites and several blacks. We'd all go together, and we get to the theater. When you go in, the blacks went to the left, and we went to the right. They had two water fountains, one for the whites and one for the blacks. And it was kind of odd to be friends and then couldn't sit together in the theater. But that was my experience, and I've been retired a long time, and got friends at the hospital, auxiliary members that were black. I got friends around that are black, and it doesn't bother me, black or white. I don't make any difference to me.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. That whole idea of how we sort of acquiesced to the overt prejudice and racism when we were growing up, though, is kind of the thing. We acquiesced to it. Yeah. Your friends went left, you went right, and that's just what we said we do. What we do what we're told to do, and that starts one of the things when, for example, when Colin Kaepernick decided to take a knee in protest of the way black people were treated in our society, it had nothing to do with football and had nothing to do with the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem. It had to do with drawing attention to an issue that he thought was wrong. Yeah. But to twist it to they're being anti-patriotic, they're being anti-country, they're being that's not it. I mean, there's all kinds of pictures of white folks kneeling. When the Pope was in and the king went to him and he said the king was trying to get his own, the English king was trying to get his own way, and the Pope was not going to let him do what he wanted to do. So finally the king goes up in Kenosha, was in the snow, and knelt in poverty and said, "Please forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." Mm-hmm. And all the adjutants to the Pope went, "For God's sakes, Holy Father, you gotta forgive him. He's asking for absolution. You gotta forgive him." And the Pope knew that as soon as he did it, the king won. Yeah. So you can be manipulated into maintaining a status quo that is, in Mike's words, inherently, and Stan's words, inherently evil. You know, you can do that. All right, Eddie or Edie?
Okay,
it's
Eddie Gray, and as Stan said, I grew up here in, well, actually in Montgomery, not far from Stan, but in a predominantly black neighborhood. We had,
oh, wow.
Neighbors on both sides of us were black. And, you know, at that time, I mean, really growing up, I really didn't know any difference between black and white. It was
people, you know, my neighbors.
It was people. you know, and it didn't matter if they're black and white. I mean, I've heard a lot of conversation here between you guys of black and white, but and there's all kind of stuff. You know, my best friend was Russian and had an aunt that married a Chinese guy. So, I mean, at that point, I really didn't know any difference. But in any event, I grew up there, went to college in Montgomery, moved away for a short time. Actually, I moved back. I'm back here now, but worked primarily here in West Virginia. I did work for a company out of Oklahoma City, and I traveled around pretty much all over the United States and across to the other side of the globe. So got to interface with a lot of nationalities and a lot of different classes of people. You know, when I grew up, predominantly was, you know, low income neighborhood type thing growing up. But anyway, I got to experience both sides of the upper class, lower class through life. And here I am. I'm back home. So
Back where I came from.
not much to say. I've seen a lot of stuff. I hear a lot of conversation here today about blacks and whites, but there's so much more than that. It's, you know, there's different nationalities, there's different classes. I see a lot of things going on today about racism with respect to class. And I mean, but anyway, here I am back home. I am who I am.
I love it. Yeah, I like that. I remember the first time my oldest son went off to day school and in Lynchburg, Virginia. And he came home one day and he said, Dad, I have a new friend. I met a friend. I got a friend. A little boy's my friend. And I said, what's his name? He said, his name is Devin. And there you go. I said, what does he look like? He said, well, he's got dark hair like I do. And he's got dark eyes like I do. And I said, black or white? And he went, what? And I went, and as I started to say it again, I realized what I had just done. Is he black or white? And he actually said, in all honesty, because he's like 5 years old, he went, I don't know. He came back the next day and said, Dad, he's a black dude. And my wife said, you know what you just did, right? You know what he just did. You know what you just did. And you, growing up, do you remember the first time you ever realized that they were a different color as a kid? Your neighbors? Did somebody draw your attention to it? Did you know?
Not really. I don't know that there was a specific time, but you know, there was actually neighbor on one side of me there was a boy there that was exactly the same age as I was. You know, he was at our house, I was at his house. I mean, it was just, you know, not a big deal. And the other side, there was, you know, they had a lot of kids, a lot of boys and girls, several kids. And in fact, some of them still live around here today. But I don't know that there was a specific time where I just realized that, you know, probably
this kid is a different color.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Well, that's like I went part of the mission of CORD is for harmony within, you know, there's no difference of gay people, whatever. And I remember that. I don't remember a day waking up saying I'm a heterosexual. I don't remember that day because I don't think it happened. I didn't wake up one day and say I'm attracted to women. That didn't happen. I don't know why that didn't happen, but I don't think it happens to most of us. Although I've talked to some gay people who have said, from the moment I could differentiate myself from other human beings, I was attracted to people of the same sex. From the moment I could differentiate. So, all right, Megan. Megan's not there. She's getting marked as present there, Megan Stan. No Megan. Missy? No Missy. Melanie. No Melanie.
She emailed me and said she couldn't get on because our password was a word instead of numbers.
She's here. Missy's here now. Hello, Missy.
This is Missy. Sorry. I couldn't find the
Hit
unmute
the
button.
unmute button.
I'm doing this on my phone. I'm trying to multitask today.
Oh, bless you.
So I've been listening to what you guys say. I'm a little bit of a younger generation than you guys are. In my town, we are 100% white. There were some African Americans that I went to high school with, but didn't really associate with them very much, except for one person I was on the soccer team with, student body council, but there wasn't a lot of interaction for me with people of any other race other than African Americans. Fortunately, my parents took me on vacation with them, and I was able to travel to South America, to China, to Japan.
Wow.
When I was older. So I did get to experience some different cultures. When I went to college, I hung out with people like me, white, middle class, didn't have a lot of other diverse friends. Not that they weren't there, but I didn't know how to interact with them because I had never done that before.
Yep.
So that's been pretty interesting. My biggest interaction is when I was probably, for the past 30 years, we go to the Bahamas every year for vacation. And that is my biggest interaction with non-white people. They are Black. They're not African. They're indigenous
Right.
Bahamians.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because they aren't African that I would treat them any differently or not. I don't know that I do treat them any differently, but that's been my biggest interaction with someone of a different colored skin.
Yep.
I remember when I was in high school, there were, mixed race couples, and they had offspring called Oreos. But I think that was the time when that's what was accepted and tolerated. I don't look at it that way. I think that we're all pink on the inside. Whether we're Black, white, orange, purple, male, female, transgender, no gender, bi-gender, we're all pink on the inside. We have the same guts, more or less. And I think that that's just how we have to treat each other. Our church is 100% white, only because it's just not in a ethnic, another ethnic neighborhood. There aren't a pile of other ethnicities in the greater Oak Hill or Fayette County area. Yeah, I have so many things that I'd like to comment on other people's things, and I'll keep it generic so that I try not to ruffle any feathers. But if we forget our past, if we forget history, and we start taking things down and wiping things away, the symbol is not there to remind you that that's not what you want to go back to. And I'll leave it generic like that. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've had a lot of exposure. I remember I was able to go to South Sudan, coming in on a World War II, flying from Lokochokio, Kenya, into South Sudan on a World War II Russian paratroop airplane flown by Russian expatriates. we landed on a dirt airfield in South Sudan. And when the first Sudanese children saw the 7 white people, it was the first white people they may have ever seen. And the first thing the kids did was run up to us and start rubbing our arms, and they were speaking the native tongue, and we didn't know what they were saying. What they were saying was, why are they covered in ash? We need to get that off of them because they've never seen white skin before.
Right. When we were in China and Japan, we're out in the middle of nowhere. And that was, they would all run up to you and want to touch you because they had never seen another non-tan person
in their
before.
life.
Right. I was going to say something else when you started that, Sudan. Oh, I did work with a gentleman that is of Indian descent, and I have a hard time working with him only because he doesn't reciprocate respect. The one thing that I have learned with them is they're male, so they think that females should be, in their culture, females are below them. They're subservient, all those great stereotypical things. So I just try to stay away from him. I try to interact on a professional level and maintain profession, but I don't try to really engage or learn anything more about him because he's just not interested.
He didn't want to know you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you don't want to keep pushing yourself at somebody who doesn't want to talk to you. I mean, that's just, well, the other one is, I get Chris Rock, comedians nowadays find it very difficult to do college tours anymore because now they can't say anything because everything is, of course, when they attack something that's really funny, it's usually because it's relevant socially and they need to talk about it and they try to make you laugh at it to draw attention to it. Well, Chris Rock said he finally went to Africa, and he said he came off the airplane, he came down the steps. It was his guy that was going to take him around, his driver, and the guy's waiting for him with his name on the the plaque in his hand. He walked down the steps. He said, "I'm Chris Rock." He said, "First thing I did is took a deep inhale, and I thought, dear God, did that man ever use deodorant? Oh my Lord!" He said, then I looked at him, and he was doing the same thing in response to me, and I knew then we were going to be okay. And he said, we started talking about that stuff. This is what we do. This is what you do. You both of you to each other. We don't look right. We don't smell right. It's not right. It's just not right. I'm very cognizant, and it's all Stan. Yes, Stan.
Just one thing to reiterate what Missy was saying is there's a saying that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the whole week.
Martin Luther King Jr. said that.
Yeah. And I don't know if Jenny wants to say anything or not, but we kind of skipped Jenny.
Jenny.
Over there with Eddie Gray.
Oh, yeah, that's Jenny.
That's Jenny, babe.
Eddie or Edie. Eddie or Edie. It's Jenny. Okay. Jenny.
Well, Eddie grew up here, and I grew up 10 miles away. And
you guys are all stayed really close to where you were born and raised, didn't you?
No.
I just, everything was segregated when I started to school, so it wasn't ever a big deal. I had lots of friends I grew up with, went all the way through school with, went through tech with them, got teacher friends that I took classes with at tech. And, then we did never teach the same schools, but she taught the higher kids, I taught the little ones, but teaching little kids, you just learn to love everybody, and it wasn't ever any kind of an issue. I mean, my ancestors are just all English. That's just what I am, and I'm not ashamed of that, and they're not ashamed of who they are, and we just, here we are.
To get those things you run into, though, Jen, get the things you run into. I used to work with a guy named Haywood Johnston, and Haywood was a black guy. We worked together at Central Virginia Training Center, and excuse the terminology, I know the words change, but when I was working there, Central Virginia Training School, just across the James River from Lynchburg, was the largest mental retardation facility in the world. We had 7,000 residents. When I went to work there, I was a resident advocate for 10 years. In Haywood, I ran out of gas at a grocery store. And I called Hayward, had to go get to the payphone and call him. He came to help me, and he said, "But I don't have a gas can." I said, "Well, there's a gas station right up here. Let me go up there and get one." So I started across the parking lot, and he's coming behind me, and I come around the corner, and the guy's standing in it, and this is like, what, 1984 in Lynchburg? And I said, "Dude, I just ran out of gas. Excuse me, sir, I just ran out of gas down here at the Kroger, and I need to borrow a gas can, get enough gas to get up here to get gas from you." He said, "Sure, I got a gas can right here." And then Haywood walked around the corner, and he looked straight at him and said, "What are you here for, boy?" And I knew immediately we were going to have a problem. And I said, "Well, he's with me." And he went, "He's with you? Then I don't have a gas can." And I said, "But it's in your hand." And he went, "Let me rephrase that for you, boy. To me, I don't have a gas can for people like you." 1982, Lynchburg, Virginia. We'll take a break. I'm convinced of this, and I'm sorry we've gone so long. In a in-person meeting, about every 55 minutes, somebody said, "Let's take a break, let's stretch, let's go get some water." In a Zoom meeting, we think nobody has to pee and nobody has to drink fluids. So let's take a little break. Let's say we'll come back at 11. I've got 10:53, and we'll be back right after that. And thank you all very much. You're outstanding people. Thank you.
What are you looking for, Donald Lee?
Not a thing, buddy. How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm doing all right. How about you?
I get my shoulder straightened out.
Is it still bothering you?
Yeah, it's not bad, but it's still aggravation.
Yeah.
We'll see a doctor Monday, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh. I went to bed about 8 o'clock, took a nap. I forgot to forget about it.
Oh, 8 o'clock this morning?
Yeah, I didn't sleep much last night.
That's your conscience.
Yeah, I guess so.
Sinful mind makes you stay awake. Well, you know, Don, I got tickled. I think on my 50th birthday, I had a physical in Waynesboro. You know, when now they all practice medicine. I'm sure Mike can appreciate that. Now they practice medicine with their back to you on the keyboard, looking at their monitor, and they don't really look at you very much. They come in and initially talk to you, and then they start doing this stuff. You know how they always end up a general practitioner's thing by saying, "Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Any issues you got?" And I said, "Well, now that you say that, Dr. Young,
yeah.
Sometimes I'll wake up after having a really good night's sleep and like a shoulder or a knee or something will hurt." And he went, "You're old." And I went, "Excuse me?" He said, "You're old." And I went, "I don't think that's very pastoral, Dr. Young." And the monitor's on an arm. So he raised it up and went, "Is that the year of your birth?" And I went, "Yes, it is." He said, "Like I said, you're old." I said, "So I just need to get over it, huh?" He said, "That's correct."
Well, see, for me to have staying in school, I got to be old.
You got to be old, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're back at 11 o'clock. You guys are really good. We're not going to take this whole thing, Stan. You're going to have plenty of time to talk to your folks here because this is not a do it kind of thing. More talking than not. Is Melanie or Megan want to add something to the conversation if they're here? Okay.
I think Jenny might have had something else to say if she stepped away for a moment, but
you want to wait till she comes back?
Whatever you guys want to do, it's fine.
Well, we could chat just for a few minutes. You guys are really good at this. You notice people are at different places, and all of that is okay. And that is nothing, because a lot of people, you know, it's like that my best member who said, "I'm tired of being called a racist."
Oh, you
Do
did?
you have anything else to say, Jenny?
What?
Did you have anything else to say?
Oh, well, I was going to say to Missy, I mean, she's talking about not taking down the past statues. And I agree with that. But I also think that, you know, there's lots of room down there at the Capitol building that they're quite welcome to put their statues inside of them. And that way we don't forget what happened and we see where we've come to.
Okay. All right. The next thing I've got, when you start talking about change and you start talking about anything that's new to you, I remember the first time I was a declared drama major when I first went into Lynchburg College, now the University of Lynchburg in Lynchburg, Virginia. And we used to have a thing, we used to give people a Blue Screw Award at our annual banquet for inappropriately timed profanity. So if somebody said something horrible, you could win the Blue Screw Award. And so every year we awarded that. But one of the days we got one from the We Didn't Know What Was Happening award. And we had a young Black actress in a show. And one of the carpenters, the master carpenter that year, was on stage. And just as she walked through the back door into the shop to go downstairs to the dressing room, he said, "It's time to hang the blacks." She went off, and rightfully so. He was talking about the drapes in the theater. They're called blacks because most of them are black because they're meant to stop your eye. You get this beautiful wall for a set. And if you look up, you know, all of a sudden there's blackness. It's because there's a black curtain back there so you don't see anything else. So hanging the blacks in the theater is not about lynching. It's about hanging curtains. So nomenclature. You've all been party that when you get new disciplines, either a doctor or a priest or anything else, a biologist, a botanist, a school teacher, you learn nomenclature that is unique to your profession. So just a few things to help you help this. So nomenclature is simply defining or choosing names for things so that we can all agree what that word means. Sometimes I ask people, do you know what the preferred language is for theologians? Anybody want to guess? Preferred
Latin?
language? Latin? No.
No?
Greek,
No. Mike?
Greek,
Elizabethan English?
English? Nope. The preferred language for theologians is German. And the reason is, in the German language, a word can only mean what it means. There's no nuance, there's no double meaning, the word means what it means. So when a theologian says something about theology in German, that word means one thing. The only one I ever remember, it's one of those things from seminary, is Sitzenleben. So when you try to understand scripture, you have to understand it's Sitzenleben. Its position or situation in life is what that word means. So a German word is not necessarily a single word, it is a concept sometimes. So Sitzenleben is situation in life. So to understand Paul, you have to understand where he lived and how he lived to help understand why he was talking the way he was talking. So when we start talking about different things, we have I'll give you just a few and we can discuss them if you want, or we can just file them by title and move on. We all have a pretty good understanding of white privilege. That refers to the unquestioned and unearned set of advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices bestowed on people solely because they are white. That's what that is. That's what the word means. Generally, white people who experience such privilege do so, and we've already talked about it, without ever being conscious of it. That's just what the word means. Institutional racism refers specifically to the ways in which institutional policies and practices create different outcomes for different racial groups. The institutional policies may never mention any racial group, but their effect is to create advantages for white people and oppression and disadvantages for any other people. Lending practices. Saturday Night Live did the best thing, one of the best talking. This was I tell you, comedians know how to get at something. Eddie Murphy went into the makeup room and changed himself into a white dude. So he was made up to look like a white dude. He goes out in public and he gets on a city bus. And this is Saturday night, so it's comedy. He gets on the city bus. And as soon as he gets on, there's a black guy on the bus and everybody else is white, including Eddie and his makeup. And then the black guy gets off. It's just a regular bus. And the black guy gets off, and all of a sudden the mirror ball falls out of the ceiling. Somebody gets up as a cocktail waitress handing everybody drinks, and there's music playing and everything's different. Okay? He goes in to get a loan. It's a black loan officer. And he goes, well, Mr. Johnson, I cannot possibly give you this loan. You have no collateral. You have no money in our bank. You have no savings. You have no checking. You don't have anything. I can't loan you this money. And then a white guy comes up and says, don't worry about this, Bob. I got him. He starts pulling money out of the drawer going, what can I get you? What else do I need? You don't need anything, sir. I'm just here to help you. That's institutional racism at a heightened level, so you can't miss it. The last thing Eddie did in that section was, of course, the makeup room for Saturday Night Live is huge and all those Barbara-like chairs. So there's like 20 chairs and there's black people in various stages of being made to look like white folks. And he says, so the next time your daughter brings home her new boyfriend from Yale, you might be surprised at who he actually is. You might be surprised. You just don't know. So that's institutional racism. The other thing is bigotry. I don't think many people are intolerant prejudice that glorifies one's own group and denigrates members of another. That's bigotry. There's all kinds of bigotry in this world, but It's not the same as prejudice. Prejudice is preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So you can be prejudiced without ever having experienced it. That's like somebody, Mike, you may appreciate this. Psychology, when I was at the training center, there was positive reinforcement, there was punishment, and then there was negative reinforcement. Well, a lot of people, the psychologists would say, what you don't understand is you understand positive. You come to work because we pay you. If we stop paying you, you would stop coming to work. So your salary is your positive reinforcement. Punishment you get, you do something that we don't want you to do, and we spritz a water bottle in your face, or we hold you down till you relax. That's punishment. Everybody understands that. And then they said, but we talk a lot here at the training center about negative reinforcement, but negative reinforcement implies a higher level of understanding, like prejudice. Negative reinforcement is, I don't rob a bank because I don't want to go to prison. I have never been in a prison, but I know it's not good. If you want to see it at its height, go down 64 at 79 miles an hour and see those blue lights up ahead of you. What's the first thing your foot does? Goes for the brake. Goes for the brake. You may have never gotten a speeding ticket, but you know it's not good. So the other one, Maggie talked about microaggressions. The everyday verbal, nonverbal, environmental slights, snubs, or insults which intentionally or unintentionally communicate hostility, derogatory negative messages to target people based solely on their marginalized group status. You've all heard the inappropriate joke. You've all heard somebody say something that you just went, ooh, really? You want to go there? Just recently in the NFL, the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, Gruden, in an email, so it's not like it's long ago and far away. He made a comment in writing about the president of the NFL Players Association, the union boss for the NFL, for the players. And he's a black dude. And Gruden in an email said he has lips like the Michelin tire guy. So that was like 2 days ago. So this stuff is not going away anytime soon, and it's deeply embedded. And there's not much you can do about it except try to do something about it in your corner of the world. There's other types of white privilege, which is cultural, institutional, white supremacy. Most of us, we don't want to talk about fragility because that really hurts us. It makes us feel bad about ourselves, and we don't want to. White supremacy is, we pretty much got down to a science. That's the KKK and the neo-Nazis and all that kind of stuff that really want to go fight people. In Charlottesville, when the people came to Charlottesville and they started with the torches and they went on campus at UVA, Mike, and they started screaming blood for land, which was a Nazi slogan. People didn't realize that when it was happening. But the whole torch thing, it was all neo-Nazi stuff, rhetoric. It's all hatred. It's all about hate. And it's all about intimidating people. So we all are privileged. We all are trying to do better with what we're doing. And nobody's beating on you to do anything that you're uncomfortable with. So now we talked a little bit about definitions. As we try to change things, and we try to make ourselves more aware, and we only want people to do what they're comfortable with. But like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about, the seven stages of grief. The stages of grief, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually 5 stages of grief. Now we've added a new one, like everything else. In the Episcopal Church, what is the 3-legged stool for the Episcopal Church? When we look at anything, we look at scripture, tradition, and reason. And now everybody wants to add a 4th leg called experience. Well, experience can lead you well down the wrong road. So we kind of stay with the 3-legged stool, scripture, tradition, and reason. If it fits those 3, then we know it's okay. When you try to change things, when you start talking about your own bias and your own bigotry and your own white privilege, all those things we have, all of us, you got to talk about your responses to those things. And it's helpful to put, in my mind at least, it's helpful to put it in a framework that you can see happening. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said the first thing happens when somebody gets bad news, the stage of grief, the first thing you do is deny it. You'll see that happening in our culture when it comes to racial issues. Just deny it. It's not there. It's like the woman in my parish. If we talk about it, it's a problem. If we don't, it's not a problem. That's denial. That's trying to protect yourself from the open realization that things are not as good as they could be. The next step is you get mad, and you'll see people try to deflect things. Don't call me a racist because I'm not. Let me tell you why I'm not. And there's that world famous, but I have a black friend. Yeah, that don't cut it. I'm sorry, that's not the answer. That's a deflection, and that's anger kicking back. The other thing is you begin to bargain, and you say, I'm not as bad as people think. I've been around. I had a friend of mine in Waynesboro. He's a friend of mine. I'm a Mason. I belong to Masonic Lodge here in Waynesboro, Lee Lodge 209. And he was from West Virginia. Don't know where. He might be up there where Stan and Mike, all you guys, I don't think so. But he went to visit his family. And he came back and he said, Kim, you'd be glad to know, his words, not mine. I come from a hollow up in West Virginia, and my family's been in that hollow for generations. Okay. And a black family moved in down on the river, and they put a trailer up. And I noticed it. And I asked my family, I said, who was that? They said, well, that's that black family just moved in. They've been there about 3 months now. And he said, are they good people? I said, yeah, they're excellent. They're wonderful people. It's a husband and wife, 3 kids. They got 2 dogs. Guy's a hunter. I mean, he's just regular folks. He said, I came back 5 months later, and there were 2 burned out trailers near the river. And I went, what happened? What somebody moved in? Did they have an accident? What happened? And his family said to him, well, the one family was okay, but 2 of them was too many.
Mm.
And he went, what did you do? And they went, well, we burned them out. Well, you didn't? Oh, no, they weren't there, but they're also not coming back. So some of this stuff does not go away at all. And it's still pretty powerful stuff all over the world. The next thing can happen when you start thinking about these things is you get depressed. You start to get depressed about it. There's really not much. Can I change it? Am I ever going to be able to change any of this stuff? We did a film for Cord, and we did a sort of run up to it using images from different media. And somebody said, we don't have enough black faces in it. And I said, well, the grand total of people in this video, the 5 black people we have in it is more people than we have per capita in West Virginia anyway. So no, it's not, because we're all white. There's no, when we were searching for a new bishop coadjutor, they started talking about racial issues. Well, we don't have any racial diversity, really. I mean, we're pretty much all white state. The last thing you do is you accept the issue that's around you, and you go, I realize this is an issue. I realize that I probably need to do something about it, but you may not want to because it's scary, and it can be contrary to what you want to believe about yourself. So the new one they've added now is finding meaning. That's a new one, Mike. They added to the whole Kubler-Ross thing is finding meaning. So you find meaning in the things of the past, and you begin to plan to change the future. The last thing I'll leave you with, and then we can ask any questions you want, because I know you got things you want to do. An action plan, if you really want to think about it for yourselves or your parish. Like I told you before, the core committee has people who are really, I got a parishioner, Johnny McGee, who's a lawyer in Charleston. He really wants us to do something. And here's what we started with. We started way back before the election in 2020. And we said, we want to get people registered. We want to get people registered. We'll have a push to get people registered. And that's a good thing in the Black community. And that's what we're going to do. And go, guess what that is, folks? That's white people riding in on the white horse thinking they know what's best. I talked to Matthew Watts, who is a minister here in Charleston, Black dude, wonderful man. He said, Kim, would it surprise you to know that 97% of the Black population in West Virginia is registered to vote? So when you listen to people, you learn something. And we went, well, what do you need, Matthew? What do you need? Well, it was too close to, you need help getting people to the polls is what he needed. That's what he needed. Well, we were in COVID. So that made that even more difficult. Nobody wants to be cooped up in the car with people they don't know for any length of time at all. So that didn't happen. But when you start to listen to people, you begin to find that the answers to the questions are within the Episcopal Church, for example, is if we want to change the color of the carpet in your church, Episcopal churches will hire a consultant because we know good and well that, 1/3 of the people love it, 1/3 of people hate it, 1/3 of people don't care. Nobody wants to make that decision, have to deal with all that grief. So we hired a consultant who can come in and tell us what to do so we don't have to hear that stuff. I think we have it within us to do the work we're given to do. God equips us with the people to do it. So then you look for, once you end up with the personal stuff, then you look for interpersonal stuff. You got to dig through your stuff first to know where you are and what you need to think about, pray about, and work on within yourself. The next step is interpersonal. You start to develop relationships with people not like you. Doesn't mean you have to go down and hunt for my best Black friend either. You work kind of where you are. I mean, you guys up in that section of the state just seem to not have gone too very far for too very long, but that's good because the people there are the people you want to build relationships with and learn to talk to. I mean, I tried to work out a sort of pulpit exchange with a Black church in Waynesboro, but it just never worked out. We couldn't figure out a mutually agreeable Sunday. And of course, my parishioners are going, well, that's a Baptist church. If he comes here, what the devil is he going to do? He don't know nothing about Eucharist. He doesn't, because he doesn't do that. He just doesn't do that. So that didn't happen. That's a good thing to do too. I did go to a Black church one time, and I swear one day I'd love to do it in an Episcopal church, and bear with me. And I know it's cultural appropriation, and I get it. But the minister got up and he started his sermon. The organ was under him, kind of soft, just kind of playing a nice little ditty underneath him. And he was kind of soft and he was kind of quiet. And then he started to work it up a little bit. And then that organ got louder and it got louder. And then it started hitting points with it. And Jesus is your savior. And I went, oh my God, I'd love to do that one time in an Episcopal church. Just once. Have that organ back up that homily just to show people what that looks like and what it feels like. And the last thing you do is you do a collective response to the injustices that you see in the world. When you do medical missions out into the world, when you do it, you have to do a collective response. You work with other partners and you begin to work together to address real issues that affect the world. I think we're sometimes in the core committee, we're just now coming out of personal. And if maybe you can fix me if I'm wrong, and we're starting to move toward interpersonal. We're starting to reach out to people like you guys today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you realize the purpose was not to suddenly mark you all as good white racist or not, just understanding that that's a possibility. But because there's a book, and I'll give you these, and like Maggie said, we're going to beat you to death with books. But let me tell you, if you really wanted to look at something, one of the best books you can get is this one. It's upside down for me now. It's called Good White Racist, Confronting Your Role in Racial Injustice by Carrie Connolly. Good White Racist. And she's a white woman. And she starts off with stuff. I'll tell you, this wonderful stuff. Introduction, just to give you just a bit of this. Hi, I'm Carrie, and I'm a racist. This is where you're supposed to say, hi, Carrie. All you guys who are in recovery.
What's the author's name?
Her name is Carrie, Kerry, Connolly, Connelly. And this book is excellent because it just takes you through. But I want you to know that I'm a racist, but I want you to know that I'm a good racist. I don't wear my white sheet over my smiling face. Instead, it's on the inside where it wraps my heart in fear I desperately wish weren't there. I'm tangled up in my brain where thoughts flash by at lightning speed because before I even have time to examine them, and it's the sweet satin feel of my privileged skin that lets me slide easily through my everyday. Because the truth is, as much as I'd like for it not to be true, it's totally possible that I'm a really good person and a really big racist at the same time. So good white racist, rather I'm referring to the majority of white people who intellectually believe that racism is evil, that being colorblind is good, and who get so uncomfortable talking about race that they will tell racial activists to shut up because it's just making things worse. And each chapter, at the end of each chapter, the first chapter is the good nation of America. We're good, but not as good as we think. And then she ends up with a section at the end of each chapter that says, so what did you learn? What do you think? And how should we act? This is a good book for Lent. This is a good book for group study because it gives you stuff to work with. The other one that people love, and Bill Shires loves it, Isabel Wilkerson, easy for me to say.
Oh, yeah, Cass.
You got to know Cass, the origins of our discontents. And she's also the author of The Warmth of Other Suns about race. She is a wonderful author, and Cass will tell you how the core bottom of that her whole story is, if poor white people, poor black people, and people of color and Native Americans would realize they're all in the same boat getting screwed over by the same people, the world would change significantly overnight.
Yeah.
And I think she's right about that. And the other one is, if you really want to get hit on the head hard, white fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And that is Robin DiAngelo, and she's a black woman. The other one, and this is just Alua, A-O-L-U-A. So you want to talk about race with a black guy. That one's a little, he just talks about what it's like being black in America. I don't know about you. I have two grown sons, 32 and 36. I never had to talk to them about police officers. I never had to talk to them about, never, not once. The YWCA here in Waynesboro does a thing on bias. And it is wonderful because in frustration, actually, one of the leaders who's black said, you know, after Floyd was murdered, she said, my neighbor, who's a wonderful, she'd been my neighbor for years. And she said, I felt so sorry for you, my friend, and talking to her black neighbor. But this thing has gotten on the news so many times and it's been hammered on so hard, I just can't take it anymore. So I just turned the TV off because I don't want to see that anymore. And she said, I usually would have let her off the hook. But I turned in frustration and said, Sally, good for you that you can turn it off and not pay any attention. But I don't have the privilege to do that because I have two black sons. I can't stop seeing it and thinking about it because I think about it every day. So, questions. It's been about an hour and a half, and then you get time to do your Stan stinks. I hate the church. Let me tell you why I'm pissed. Like we haven't heard that before.
Kim, one of the things that I experience when the conversation comes up about racism, that I have a hard time defending where I'm coming from,
Okay.
is without fail, somewhere in that conversation, they're going to say, yeah, but black people are racist too, right against white people. And then you have to get into that whole conversation, you know, because I usually ultimately say, well, if I was a black person in this culture, I'd be the most militant
person on the planet,
defending my cause. You know, ultimately, and that's the wrong thing to say. I realize that.
Yeah, you don't want to get adversarial with anybody if you can.
Exactly.
And you also don't want to be.
That's a big challenge, and I just think that's a big challenge because ultimately, without fail, you're going to get that statement. Well, they're just as racist as we are, and they're not because it's apples and oranges. Apples and oranges. What they're feeling and sensing and what we think we feel and sense is apples and oranges.
Well, I can help you a little bit because racism is prejudice coupled with social and institutional power, and black people don't have that.
Exactly.
That's the key. That's the key. Racism is prejudice. Black people can be prejudiced. but they're not racist because they don't have social and institutional power. When we have these conversations on Cord, ladies, you feel the same way sometimes. Like the Missy with the guy from India, who was just dismissive because of your gender. And you can't do anything about that. He's not going to, that's who he is. I mean, that's his understanding of the way the sexes work. But that's not true.
Yeah, one more thing that I want to ask, and you can help me on this, Kim. I need help on it. Is you saying when we start having these conversations with people outside our realm and
Right.
things, that you don't want to do anything that you're not comfortable with?
Mm-hmm.
Would it not kind of behoove us to be at times with our spiritual faith convictions, to be uncomfortable with where we're having to step out and be? That uncomfortability is the cross that we're
Is the
taking
cross you got to carry?
yeah
Yes, yes,
that we're bearing.
yes.
I think sometimes it's not going to be, well, if we got to stay comfortable, then
Then we're never going to do anything.
how far are we going to get? So
Yeah.
I would
You're
just
right. We won't. If we feel uncomfortable, we don't want to do anything. But I don't think anytime you have people talking that are in different places on any topic, the thing you don't, as ladies, I'm going to give you that, you've heard it many times. You don't want to get into mansplaining. You don't want to get into, right, ladies, mansplaining. I'm going to tell you how this really works, you poor ignorant people. You just don't understand. So let me give you the definition so you'll understand what we're talking about. The best thing to do when you start off is when you notice the microaggressions, those things that are insensitive by their very nature, that you call those out. My wife and I should go across the street and tell the man we're offended. We're offended, but that doesn't mean he's got to do anything about it. And then you got to understand that too, because we want people to be engaged with each other and unafraid to say what you really think. Because part of institutional racism is to keep it quiet, is to not talk about it, is to divert you from that comment and say, well, Black people are racist too. And I don't think that we need to talk about this anymore because this doesn't mean this and that doesn't mean that. And you don't understand because, that I have a Black friend, take a knee. I mean, when the culture took the take a knee to mean anti-patriotic, that was never what that was about. Dr. Martin Luther King said when the moderate and conservative Christians who were very supportive of the Black community, they said, slow down, Dr. King, slow down. You need to be more respectful. You need to be more accommodating to get along. We got to move forward at a measured pace. And he went, if we don't do it now, when the hell are we going to do it?
right.
I mean, I have never gone to the lynching museum down in Alabama, but I would love to see that because it's not that long ago that people were still doing that. I met Ruby Sales in our book of Holy Men, Holy Women for Saints. Jonathan Daniels was gunned down in Alabama because she was walking up to a store and he saw the shotgun come out the door and he pushed her out of the way and stood in front of it. And he was killed instantly. She spoke in Lexington. He's remembered at VMI. So this is not like this is going away. And sometimes it can get really ugly. One of our earlier meetings on Cord, one of our Black members we had for a little bit there talked about growing up in Georgia. And his father owned a cleaning business in the 50s. He was coming back late one night. His father had always told him, don't get pulled over by a Georgia State trooper late at night by yourself or they will never see you again. I mean, folks, I'm not making this stuff up. He said he was pulled over. He was coming home late from cleaning an office building. He was pulled over with the truck with the company name on the side and the company name on the trailer. And the Georgia State trooper walked up to him and said, boy, what are you doing out this late at night? And he said, well, you don't have any. He goes, I can do any damn thing I want, son. And about that time, he said his radio, the cop's radio crackled, and he had a call he had to go to. And the guy looked at him, the Georgia State Trooper looked at him and said, "You're the luckiest in the world tonight, son." 1950s. When we talk about skin color, the project, I'd never heard of that for a while, the 1619 Project, which was started by a newspaper editor in New York. 1619 was when the first black slaves came to Jamestown. And when they came to Jamestown, that was the first time people used color to describe people in this country, because everybody was white before that, right? English, they were all English, German, whatever. So they're black, and then black began to mean lazy, evil, less than. We brought a black family up after Hurricane Katrina to Waynesboro, and I heard a older parishioner say, well, the family went out and got, individual juices or something. He said, I got to explain to these people that's a stupid waste of money. I went, Pal, don't do that. For God's sakes, don't do that. You're treating them like, you're treating this family like children. They're not children, they're grown adults. They can do what they want to do. So I don't know if that helped, but that whole thing about racism, you can't say black people are racist because they don't have the power. Racism implies you have power to enforce your racism. And you know what? Us old white guys get scared sometimes, I think.
Thank you for that. That's very good. Very good.
Because it's all associated with power. Most of this stuff boils down to power. If black athletes, the black power thing in the Olympics, when they did that, maybe not so much. I mean, Tim Tebow takes a knee for a different reason, but he took a knee. So Martin Luther King took a knee. I don't know. The system is designed to maintain itself, and it has been for a very long time.
All systems are.
Yep. They're meant to be self. Listen, there's a great book. Kent Higgins talking about this book. If you really want to, the book is called The Power and the Majesty. It's Episcopal Church in its heyday. In Colonial Williamsburg, in Virginia, to vote, what did you have to be in Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia?
Anglican?
White.
A white landowner. Male landowner.
Male, 21 years or older, land in your own name, and a card-carrying Anglican. Yeah. So in Colonial Williamsburg, about 10% of the population could vote. In the Episcopal Church, we used to have all white male clergy. We all went, "Yay! That's when the world was at its best." No, not so much. Diversity is a powerful thing. It works well, I think. Makes us better people. Any questions other than Stan's?
It seems to me that one way that power is being exerted over people of color is through legislation.
Yes.
And I think it's worse. This coming legislative session for many, many states is going to see more restrictive voting laws passed because we have more conservative and, I will say, bigoted state legislatures. And I don't know how we get around that.
Only thing you can do if you want to be actively involved is you have to contact those people like any political process and voice your concern.
But don't we also have to work to get better people to run for office?
There is that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like somebody said, the last many several, there's been many elections where he said, really, this is the two best we've got?
Yeah, right.
Really? I mean, both, and no matter which two parties, but the other one is, who was it? Who said it? One of my classmates, Rob Wright, is the Bishop of Atlanta. Now, I have been in Atlanta, but I've never driven. Anybody driven in Atlanta?
I have.
So the main drag that shoots through, that's, 12 lanes and nobody's ever moving, right? Yep. It's horrible.
Yeah.
He wrote an article for the Diocesan Journal that, I don't know, what's the number of that road? I have no idea. You know,
I can't remember.
it's an interstate, right? It's like I
Yeah.
something. He said
I think it's I-81.
I-81.
That's how fast you're supposed to go.
Yeah, right. So he said I-81. People complain about I-81 all the time, and Rob writes Black. He said people complain about I-81 forever because it doesn't move traffic. The only problem with that statement is I-81 through Atlanta was never designed to move traffic. It was designed to separate white and Black neighborhoods, and it does that very well
Perfectly. Perfectly.
on either
It's-
side of the road.
It's I-85.
I-85, but it separates, and he's been down there now for 15 years, and he just said,
Mhm.
it's tough, it's hard. So, but the redistricting and electing people, I don't know. We don't even want to talk about other things that affect the country, but we're talking about this one simple thing. And also we have, last thing I'll give you is this, we have people that want to talk about, transgender people and the LGBTQ plus community. And I just think that will sometimes that diffuses what you're trying to do, because you can't do all of it. You have to kind of move sequentially through each one, kind of. This is our first start. You guys are like the third group that's ever done this. I hope it was useful. Please let Maggie know if it was or wasn't. Anything you want to do different. I hope we didn't beat on anybody, and make sure that people's, their thoughts and their concerns were heard, and sometimes their positions are different, and that's okay, because that makes us who we are. I mean, like say in Episcopal Church, I tell people this and people always act shocked. Stan can deal with it, so can Maggie. I don't care who you are in any parish, this is just a truth. 1/3 of the people love the priest because they do. 1/3 of the people hate the priest because they do. 1/3 of the people don't care about the priest in any way, shape, or form. The true genius realizes that the membranes between the thirds is permeable, and people are jumping between each one, and you never know which one they're in at any given time.
Amen.
Same thing happens in the world. Same thing happens in the world. People see an issue or they don't see an issue. They think it's this, it's right, it's wrong, it's this. I mean, there's all kinds of, but who was it said? I wish I could remember who it was. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You are. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Nobody's entitled to make up their own facts.
Right.
When you start doing that, then you're manipulating things for yourself. Any other questions? I can leave you guys to have a good time. I didn't think we were going to fill up all this much time. You guys were a joy to talk to and learn about, and a joy to have you talk about stuff. I really appreciate that very much. You don't know how much. I heard Mike say one time, he said just before he was really finishing off and realized what was going on, and he said to the convention after the election of the coadjutor, almost in tears, he said, I really love you people. I really do.
Yeah.
And it was from his heart. You could tell. Mm-hmm. Folks, I've only known you since 9:30 this morning, but I'll tell you what, I love you guys. You guys are good. You guys are good.
Mike.
You have your opinions. And I may have to come up to that area of the woods, but you guys might shoot me because I haven't lived there for 50 years.
We're going to hold you to that, Kim. And thank you so much for giving up your Saturday morning to be with us. We appreciate it.
Let Maggie know if it was helpful, this disenfranchising or whatever, it'll help us do better next time. If you never want somebody else to do it again, feel free to ask and we'll get somebody to you.
Thank you, sir. Check's in the mail.
That's no problem, brother. I got it. Oh, you know what else I found out? I'm teaching for the Iona school.
Yeah.
I'm doing pastoral care. Go figure. I guess the nurse in me is I'm doing pastoral care, and it's been fun. I mean, I've only had one class. I got one tonight, but it's been fun. And then I got a week or two after the first class, this thing came from David Ramke. He said, I'm sorry I didn't send you your pay for the last. And I went, pay? Nobody said anything about paying me. Nobody said anything about paying me. Am I going to get paid to do this? And sure enough, a check came in the mail.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much. We're ever indebted to you.
About your clergy.
God bless you.
Thank
you. Let me leave you with one prayer as I leave, because I love this. There's a book called Hearts on Fire, Praying with the Jesuits. The Jesuits, you know, I love when somebody, a Roman Catholic nun said, the Jesuits are the Marine Corps for the Pope. They're the first in the fight. They're the first sent out. But I love this prayer, and I'm going to leave you with this because it touches every time I hear it. My heart is warmed. Let us pray. Teach us to listen, O God, to those nearest to us, our families, our friends, our co-workers. Help us to be aware that no matter what words we hear, the message is, accept the person I am. Please listen to me. Teach us to listen, my caring God, to those far from us, the whisper of the hopeless, the plea of the forgotten, and the cry of the anguished. Teach us to listen, O God, my mother, to ourselves. Help us to be less afraid, to trust the voice inside in the deepest part of us. Teach us to listen, Holy Spirit, for your voice, in busyness and in boredom, in certainty and in doubt, in noise and in silence. Teach us, Lord, to listen, because it is in listening that we hear your voice. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I'm out, guys. Have a good one. Thank you. God bless all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome, guys. Have a good day.
I'm reading some comments that on Facebook, the people that are watching on Facebook, and they're very positive. So that's good, and thank you, Megan, for doing that. One of the things that I want to say is, as you all know, the bishop has asked us to get deeply engaged in this conversation and dialogue with this. I know Ascension Hinton is doing that. I think our other three parishes are not, and I know COVID plays a big part in that. I do know that COVID has restricted us being able to come together the way we want to, but I do hope that we continue this conversation, and I truly believe that we're all going to grow and learn and shed and release some things in our lives if we continue this conversation. Any comments from anyone? Well, that being said, I promised everyone we'd probably be finished so you can watch college football. So we have a few more minutes. Is there anything out there anyone has a question or an issue about other than what we've been talking about this morning?